Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking a few minutes to listen to me ramble a little bit. We don't have a lot of time together, so we will jump right in. But as you have questions and thoughts, I'll talk at you, but I really am, interested in some dialogue. These are some of my ideas. Maybe some of them are good. Maybe some of them are dumb, but we're trying. And Chesterton said, if there's anything worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. So we have a serious problems in our country that are not being addressed. You don't have to look too far to see the insane level of civil discord and overall unhappiness in our cities, in our towns, in our homes, and our families. We're told that racism, xenophobia, corporate greed, socialism, too much government control, environmental destruction, too little government control, partisan politics, guns are all to be blamed for our societal ills. But I think that misses what I see as a larger problem. Much of the framework that in the past has guided our engagement with civil society has been largely eliminated. I heard of an experiment somewhere, can't remember where, and maybe it never really ever was an experiment, but it helps to make my point, so I'll share it anyway. There was a playground put in the middle of a gigantic field, and little kids were put on the playground, and they were observed, and they all stayed very close to the playground and didn't venture too far into the unknown field. Another group of children were put on the same playground, and this time a fence was circled around the playground at some distance. And it wasn't too long before the kids had ventured away from the playground and had explored every inch of that fence circling the field. I think this is the problem that we have in America today. There are no fences to guide our productive engagement with society. Lest you think I'm jumping to solve a problem that doesn't really exist, let's take a closer look at just a few of the things going on around us. I just moved from Seattle after 47 years, where you can hardly exit a freeway without being greeted by a homeless person looking for a handout. There are an estimated 12,000 people living in tents all across the town. They have no access to running water, to a toilet, to a shower, or a glass of milk. And I've observed very similar situations in various cities around the country that I've visited. How many young adults have we run into lately that are having a tough time finding a meaningful job or one that is paying a decent wage? Almost nonstop over the last year, there have been massive riots destroying millions of dollars of personal and public property. It might be the case that some of these folks don't feel like they're really needed to show up at the office on Monday morning. Partisan politics like we've never seen. Just try bringing up a discussion about some Trump policy over turkey dinner at the in-laws and see what happens. I knew that divorce was a problem, but I was surprised to learn that in a recent UN study, they put the United States as having the highest rate of divorce of any country, aside from Belarus and Maldives. The rate of suicide continues to increase and is now the number 10 leading cause of death in the United States. 80% of households have declined in net worth over the last 30 years, even though many of these households now have two breadwinners. 50% of households would have a tough time coming up with $500 in an emergency. People are getting married later and later and are increasingly less likely to have any children at all. Some new corporate scam by Enron or Facebook or Lehman Brothers or whatever evil corporation of the day is a daily event. From any perspective, these facts portray a very sick country indeed. And how did this come about so quickly? My dad was a cop patrolling the streets of Seattle in the 70s and the 80s and never once saw a tent or a blue tarp in any of the parks. Much of the problems we are experiencing today have been quickly brought about by the last couple of generations. The American spirit has been absolutely crushed. The once brightly burning entrepreneurial fire that brought our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents to this country to stake a claim and through the sweat of their brow provide a better life for their families has been largely extinguished. Now that we've determined that we really do have some issues to address, what do we do about it? How do we encourage the next generation to get fired up about maximizing their positive contribution to society and to fix these problems that us older folks have left them? I mentioned a few minutes ago that we no longer have a good framework to guide our societal engagement. Church attendance has plummeted. People no longer stay in a particular neighborhood, or much less in a particular state. We don't know our neighbors. We don't have block parties anymore. Some of you younger folks might not even know what a block party is. We had some great block parties in Seattle, in the neighborhood I grew up on, Capitol Hill. We closed the street, and each neighbor would have some event in their front yard, bobbing for apples or making cookies or playing lawn darts, and we'd ride our bikes and skateboards up and down the street. We spent time with our neighbors and got to know them. Today, we feel very uncomfortable going next door to borrow an egg. There used to be a number of people that would hugely influence our daily lives. The friendly manager at the neighborhood market, the pastor, the policeman, the uncle, the teacher, the old lady across the street. You can probably think of a number of better examples than these, but I think you might get my point. We used to have an infrastructure that gave us a place in society and guided our positive contribution. Much of that has disappeared, and we no longer feel like anyone cares about us or anything that we do really matters. Certainly not the only reason, but what I think is a really big one is how businesses run in our society today. We used to live in a society where trust and honesty, integrity, reliability, hard work, loyalty were just assumed qualities in our fellow man. But we no longer have those expectations. In fact, we actually expect others to try to take advantage of us. And we accept this as just the way the world works today. Our contemporary business environment has conditioned us to view one another through a purely economic lens. Homo economicus is what we have been reduced to. It's just a business decision is a line that comes right before your friend takes advantage of you. We're taught in our schools from a young age to take advantage of each other. That's not exactly what we say. We call it the art of negotiation. We call it market-based wages. We blame the invisible hand and don't take any personal responsibility. As long as we're focused on maximizing profit, we can pay paltry wages and squeeze our vendors and destroy the environment. I heard of a US company that was buying t-shirts in Bangladesh, paying $2 to the factory and selling them on the shelves in the department stores for $30 here in the States. And the factory was so focused on meeting the lowest cost possible, they neglected to invest in the maintenance of the building, and the roof collapsed, and many of the 200, mostly women and children in that factory were crushed and died. We hear from independent news sources of similar stories of the treatment of the Uyghur people today in Western China. Perhaps we've eradicated slavery in the United States, but it seems we continue to support similar conditions for workers in other parts of the world via our purchasing decisions. But I don't think most people like what is going on in corporate America. I don't think most workers agree with how their companies are being run. And I think the data agrees with me. In a 2017 Gallup poll, 85% of those surveyed said that they hated their jobs. That's a pretty big number. A pretty sad reflection upon our current environment. Most people spend 10 hours of every day working for these companies, and they hate their jobs. This is sad. But the good news is that there is a solution. I'm sure there are lots of solutions, but one in particular that I want to share with you all. The answer is what we have always known since the founding of our country: ownership. Ownership in a piece of land, ownership in productive property. Though the productive property is no longer a mining claim or a ranch or farmland, ownership today is in corporate stock. The difference between the 80% of households that have declined in net worth over the last 30 years and the 20% of households that have seen their net worth rise nearly 100% during that same time frame is that the 20% own everything. They own the stock. They own the 401ks. They own the real estate. Fortunately, a solution is right under our noses, a solution that can bring ownership back to tens of thousands of workers literally overnight. It's called employee ownership. Specifically, employee stock ownership plans, or ESOPs, offer sustainable, scalable solutions with the potential to address income inequality, revitalize the middle class, and bring about a balanced alignment among all stakeholder interests. A veritable utopia right in front of our eyes. I'm sure many of you have heard of ESOPs, but maybe you don't know exactly how they come into being or how they operate. Companies don't typically start out as employee-owned. When a company looks to sell, for whatever reason, various exits are considered. Management buyouts, initial public offerings, handing the business over to their children, to the next generation, and more. And more and more common is selling to private equity. Uniquely, an ESOP is created through the owner selling to the employees by carrying a note for the transaction value. The employees don't have any cash and so commit to pay off the seller through the future earnings of the business. As the note is paid off, shares are freed up to be allocated to the employees' retirement accounts. The amount of shares are allocated on a pro rata basis to the employees based upon their percentage of total wages paid. If $1 million in total wages is paid out in a year and you owned 100,000, you earned 100,000 that year, whatever the allocation of shares is for the year, you would receive 10% of those shares. These shares vest over a 5-year period of time, not overnight. So you got to stick around for the shares to vest. And if you wait until retirement age of around 62, there's a 1-year waiting period. And then the shares are bought back from you by the company over another subsequent 5-year period of time. And the value of those shares is set by an independent company every year to determine the price that's going to be paid for those shares by the company. If an employee departs prior to retirement age, there is a 5-year waiting period before the 5-year repurchase period kicks in. And the idea is really to encourage long-term management decisions and long-term value creation. And as a 100% ESOP, the company no longer has any income tax obligations, and it can instead use that money to pay off the seller and to invest the money back into the business. A sale to the employees living in an area protects the local jobs, adds to the wealth of the employees themselves, benefits the local community, and allows those entrepreneurs who helped build the business to cash out their equity interests and enjoy a well-deserved retirement themselves. Another positive is we avoid another private equity transaction that often result in lost jobs, offshoring of the manufacturing, destruction of employee morale, reduction in the quality of products, and eventually selling the firm to yet another private equity group 5 years later, so the new owners can then try to squeeze a little more juice out of the turnip. A mere 50% of private equity transactions achieve their financial target. On the other hand, ESOPs pay out 100% of the target value over 95% of the time. ESOPs allow the workers themselves to build up this capital ownership, in addition to earning their normal wages. About 2% of the 100 million workers in America own 100% of the company for which they work. These 2,000 worker-owned companies experience stronger year-over-year growth, greater customer satisfaction, and longer-term competitive advantage than non-employee-owned companies. And these companies are not just little farming cooperatives, but many mid-size and even large-scale entities, many of which are household names. Gore-Tex has 10,000 employees, Public Supermarkets, 200,000 employees, Winco out of Boise, about 40,000, Schweitzer Engineering, one of the largest engineering firms in the country, has about 5,000 engineers based out of Moscow, Idaho. Air Tractor makes crop dusting airplanes down in Texas. Bob's Red Flour Mill, Wawa convenience stores, Harpoon, one of the first craft breweries out of Boston, Lighthouse Salad Dressing, to name just a few. Research done by Nancy Wyfek at the National Center for Employee Ownership found that employee owners ages 28 to 34 had 92% greater median household net worth than non-employee owners. And they earned 33% higher wages, along with greater job security and better benefits. I met a gentleman in North Carolina who created an ESOP about 10 years ago, and already has had 20 employees retire with over $1 million in company shares. Another gentleman shared with me the problem that he has at a machine shop he manages in Portland. A number of his employees are retiring early because they can afford to. Ayanna Banks in San Francisco shares, "I'm a single mother of 2 beautiful girls, and being an owner at Recology has given me the tools I need to make them successful in life. Being an ESOP company is more like being one family, and that's because everyone cares. They know that this is just not a company they work at, it's a company they have ownership in." We see the ESOP benefiting dependents as well as the employees themselves. Sydney Bolton in Chicago, "I'm retiring as a senior team leader after 20 years, and I get to start all of this 2 years early, thanks to S&C. Veronica Ortiz at Web Industries, "On any given day, one would be hard-pressed to find an employee owner at Web who isn't happy to work here. We teach one another to understand the business and to take part in the challenge of growing it for ourselves, our families, and our successors, no matter what our titles may be." Mounting data highlights the correlation between employee ownership and stronger families. When married couples hit financial strife, their levels of marital satisfaction plummets, and they become much more likely to split up. Such were the findings of a 2011 research study by the University of Missouri, which determined that couples earning 20 grand or less were more likely to think about separation, especially if they received government assistance to make ends meet. In contrast, ESOP employees experience less financial difficulty and have the pride of paying their own way instead of relying on handouts or subsidies. In addition, ESOP employees report less stress in the work environment. Worker-owned companies are 3 times as likely to offer medical coverage and extended family leave, and they're 4 times less likely to experience layoffs. The best human resources practices include creating an ownership mentality in their workforce. They want employees to take ownership of the business process of customer satisfaction. HR executives know an ownership mentality contributes to a greater sense of fulfillment amongst the team, and they work harder and take better care of the business and of their customers. But most corporations are not actually willing to include their employees in real ownership. This is the power of the ESOP. Everyone is an actual owner. and therefore everyone acts like one. There's piles of data as well as anecdotal evidence that in an ESOP, employees are happier, they work harder, their families are better taken care of, they earn more money, and they build meaningful retirement. So what has that got to do with the new little college in Hagerstown? Well, it's because ESOPs are an incredible practical application of Catholic social teaching. I imagine many of you have heard the term, but perhaps think it merely pertains to giving bologna sandwiches and slightly used socks to homeless people. In fact, it is much more than that. Pope Leo XIII saw how the Industrial Revolution was attracting people away from an agrarian lifestyle with the promise of higher and more consistent wages. This may have been the case at times, but as things went, many were laid off and found themselves with nothing, now relying on the government, the church, or begging for handouts. Alexis de Tocqueville's memoir on pauperism detailed the growing segment of the population that could not take care of themselves. They owned nothing, saw their families fall apart, and were reduced to paupers. Think Oliver Twist, Bob Cratchit, or any Dickens novel. Leo declared that society should be guided not by a pursuit of individual greed, but to some higher set of principles. Subsequent pontiffs have added to this study of secular civil society and have added to this deposit we now call Catholic social teaching. There's more to it than this, but in an interest of time, we'll briefly touch on what are considered the four pillars. One, solidarity. At its core is recognizing that we're all part of the one mystical body of Christ. When the toe gets stubbed, the entire body feels the pain. We are obligated to operate and engage in the economy through fraternal charity, love of our brother. Subsidiarity, retaining decision-making at the lowest competent level possible. Human dignity, not considering humans as a means to a profit end, but as the most important proper end itself. If a business can't pay a fair wage, the business has no justification for existing. The common good, only selling goods or providing services that are truly beneficial for society, considering the impact to communities, to families, and to the environment. Unfortunately, these principles are not discussed too much these days in Catholic universities, or in any universities for that matter. But the good news is that Ed is going to change all that. I suggest 7 ways that an ESOP creates the structure to encourage alignment with these principles, and instead of appealing to maximizing personal benefit, it actually encourages virtuous behavior in the marketplace and contributes to authentic human flourishing. 1, sustainability. An ESOP operates with an evergreen mentality. Management takes a long-term approach without the short-term influence of Wall Street to hit unreasonable quarterly earnings targets, or have the capital that should be directed to research and development and innovation siphoned off by stockholders. There's little incentive for a board to hide dealings from the government or not follow regulations. Implementation of an ESOP has the power to improve overall business structure so as to maintain healthy companies which are able to offer steady employment while contributing to the economy long term. Subsidiarity. People closest to the situation are going to make the best decisions. In the very first year of their ESOP, a trucking company saved $350,000 on brake repairs. The drivers now own their trucks, and so they took better care of them. As I imagine many of you, I've rented hundreds of rental cars, and I'm pretty sure I've never washed one of them. Workers take ownership of their particular business process and make better decisions. Stewardship or governance. The typical corporation is run by a board which has a fiduciary responsibility to the outside investors. There's a continual conflict between increasing dividends and increasing wages. All too often, employees merely get the leftovers after the shareholders have taken the cream from the profits. In contrast, though an ESOP is governed by a similar looking board of directors, the directors now have a fiduciary responsibility to the employees, who are now the owners. The profits are no longer siphoned off by outside shareholders, and the profits instead now go to increased wages, better work environment, continued education, and meaningful retirement. Number 4, just wage. While an ESOP doesn't necessarily guarantee any particular wage, statistics show that most ESOPs do benefit workers monetarily. I mentioned earlier that young workers earn 33% more than their peers in non-ESOP companies. Employees retiring from an ESOP have nearly 2.5 times the retirement assets as their peers. What a hugely more beneficial result for society than our elderly having to work as greeters at Walmart in order to afford their medication. Number 5, solidarity. The dynamics of an ESOP structure create a healthy interdependence of employees to aid one another instead of stepping on their teammates to get ahead. ESOPs constitute an economic policy with even the potential to bring members of our incredibly fractioned two-party system into closer harmony. Think 2 mountain climbers that are more likely to get to the top if they are tied to one another. Independently, they're more likely to both fall to their death. Preferential option for the poor. Perhaps the most critical concern facing us today is the fragility of the middle class. Long a bulwark of the nation, today it is estimated that half of American workers are just a few missed paychecks away from being out on the street. The phenomenal growth of the homeless population is an obvious indicator. This expansion in the homeless population is not due to a dramatic increase in birth rates among the homeless. Rather, the homeless population is being daily enlarged by the increasing fallout from the middle class. I met a professor who's followed ESOP companies for decades and has studied the impact on low-wage earning minorities. She couldn't gather enough data for a statistically significant sample size as the employees she tracked kept moving up the economic ladder. 7, the dignity of the human person. ESOPs protect and support the family as the basic unit of society. It is in centering our political economy on the well-being of human workers and their dependents, and not on just greed or atheistic ideologies. Over the last 30 years, those with equity have enjoyed a 100% increase in household net worth, while wage earners have experienced a decline in their domestic balance sheet. ESOPs and other structures that support broad-based ownership have the potential to root productive capital in communities, increase the assets and income of working families, and help stem the financial hemorrhage that is crippling the middle class. Today, more and more customers are buying American to keep jobs at home. More are patronizing farmers markets in order to positively influence food quality in their communities. More are selecting local produce with the goal of investing in their neighbors. There's reason to believe that the concept of shared capitalism has also attracted the attention of these thoughtful consumers. A 2016 survey by Public Policy Polling revealed that 68% of respondents support the concept of companies being owned by their employees, and they're willing to pay significantly more for products produced by firms that boast the employee-owned logo. Socially conscious consumers are already taking an active role in the movement to help build a more sustainable economic future for American workers, for their families and their communities. The ESOP, aligned with Catholic social teaching, is the most scalable and sustainable solution to revitalize the middle class and once again guide the American entrepreneurial spirit to maximize one's positive contribution to civil society. Thank you for your patience with my ramblings. I hope there's a few points in here that are of interest to you, and I'd love to take any questions or dodge any potential criticisms you might have for anything that I've shared. Just to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with making money. I think it's great. It's really a matter of priorities. And the ESOP really does help create the right kinds of priorities so that everyone can be, rowing at the same pace and helping one another instead of fighting each other and taking advantage of one another in a dog eat dog civil society or uncivil society, as the case may be.
Well, we have a small enough group. If you'd like to unmute yourself to ask a question, Gellert, and I've got one just to get us started. How small is too small of a company to have an ESOP? I mean,
well, yeah, that's a really good question, Paul. Specifically, an ESOP, it's governed by the Department of Labor, and there are a lot of things you have to do legally. You have to pay for these outside valuations every year. You need a third-party administrator to help you navigate this thing. So there are some expenses, and maybe a company of around 50 employees, it makes sense to pursue specifically an ESOP. There are different kinds of corporate structure that you can accomplish much of the same objectives as an ESOP. But the reason why I like the ESOP is because it's here, it's proven, it's been working for 40 years. It creates a tax-free environment, so it's really a powerful structure that works well.
I have a question, if I may ask.
go ahead, Joseph.
So actually, my name is Sean Williams. Joseph's my son. I'm watching this with my boys.
Go ahead, Sean.
How are you? First of all, awesome presentation. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for making this available to us. My question is, I manage a relatively decent-sized not-for-profit hospital. Have you heard of not-for-profits converting themselves into ESOPs? And if so, how has that worked?
I don't. I have not heard of that occurring. I might be able to put you in touch with some people to help navigate that. In a nonprofit, the company doesn't earn any money, or it does. If it does, it has to be reinvested into the business. But no, I've not seen that happen. But thanks for your work in the hospital and keeping us healthy.
Well, we're trying, but I think and it's a Catholic institution, but I think one of the things we've struggled with is how you achieve the outcomes of ESOPs, which I've been fascinated with for years, and just exactly what you described. And even though we're not for profit and we're mission based, you don't necessarily get that level of engagement that you're describing, which makes all the sense in the world. We've certainly seen that in ESOPs that we're familiar with. So I think benefit in serving our mission would be phenomenal. And so it's definitely something I want to explore.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. There are some things that you could do inside of the nonprofit. I imagine you do have some kind of a 401k or retirement plan there. You can put together profit sharing plans, hit certain targets and people get paid more money and things. But yeah, I think you're right. Americans, they want ownership in something. They're going to work harder for it. They're going to be more productive and more engaged. So yeah, pursue it.
Okay, thank you.
Joseph, you and I should connect, because as Gellert was speaking, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, well, here the collegium is bringing him in, but is this something that we can somehow? I don't think you can do it with a nonprofit for the exact reason you said, Gellert. But I think there are elements of it that we could incorporate into the way we do business. And so maybe, Joseph, you and I could connect. That could be the beginning of a kind of a brainstorming conversation that might lead to some of these practices.
Very good. I'll reach out to you with an email. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks. And Gellert, I have a question. If somebody wanted to do this, where do they go? I assume are there legal firms that deal specifically with this kind of work? Where would someone go?
It's a good question. It's not. You don't know anything about ESOPs until you know about ESOPs. Maybe it's sort of like you buy a particular car and then you see everyone else driving the same car. But 6 years ago, I didn't know anything about ESOPs. I thought it was communism for business or something. But as I got to learn more about it, I was just fascinated. And it's an incredibly sophisticated area. There's tremendous studies, there's lots of data, gigantic companies that are really well run, that are 100% employee owned. It's fascinating. And then there are not tons, but there are quite a few transaction firms where they have attorneys and CPAs really to help navigate these transactions.
So
But
it
they
would
can be
be
expensive and they take a while.
Yeah, it would be there are firms that deal specifically with this work.
Yeah, yeah.
So for Sean's benefit, not ESOP related, but when I went to graduate school, I came across this idea of open book management. And so in the private sector, when I worked for a restaurant company, I brought that to the organization where you share the expenses, you share everything going on with the employees. You don't have to share the salaries of everybody, but you can share the big picture of what the costs are. So I think, that's another piece of, part of ESOP. I mean, it's open book because employees know what the expenses are, where the money's going. And so that's another possibility of bringing some open book management. And again, I work for a nonprofit, but it's a tax status, not business plan. We still have surplus, we have deficits, we have to pay our bills, and we have a board of directors. So I think that's another avenue. And I think what I'm hearing from Gellert is employees have to have buy-in. They have to have ownership of some sort. If you engage them and tell them how the business is being run or how the nonprofit is being run, we all have customers. And if the customers aren't happy, we don't have a job. I don't care if you're a nonprofit or for-profit. The focus is on how do you keep your customers happy internally and externally.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do outside of an ESOP to, better incentivize people and to include them in the value creation. High tech, has done a lot with stock options and things that have worked very well and have created a lot of meaningful income for people. So there's a lot of things to do, but in an ESOP, it just becomes inherent. It's not as contrived. It's authentic, and it works very well.
Transparent. How do you look at succession planning for ESOP? So when you have, I don't know if you call them president, what you call the person running the organization, but how do you look at succession planning to keep the organization viable and moving forward when that leader leaves and he or she buys out, but you also want to continue on the business?
Yeah, the ESOP has some inherent aspects to its structure that really help address that concern, because when someone sells their business to their employees through an ESOP, they don't get a check right away. The company has to continue to perform positively so they get paid off. And so they become very concerned, are the new leaders of the company going to be incentivized enough? Are they going to be competent enough to run the business well so that I get paid? And there's an opportunity to create synthetic equity for the management team so that if they run the business successfully and pay off the seller, then they get a sizable chunk of the new equity value of the business at that point. And so really, when people have ownership, when they have a lot of money on the table, they tend to perform better. And so there's a great incentive structure that's possible within the ESOP. That doesn't necessarily address the competency, but that's why an ESOP needs to have a for real board of directors. Many businesses, closely held businesses, lack sophistication in governance. And as a company is looking to create an ESOP, they need to go through the process of having outside board members, join the governance team, and so that they are making sure that the right people are being hired. It's not just because it was someone's friend or whatever, that they are competent and they're running the business for the long-term best interest of the employees who now are the owners. And so the success of these new ESOP formations, they're incredibly successful. They work.
Other questions or comments or feedback from those on our call? Here, let me help you out here. There we go.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Gellert. Great presentation. I noticed it's being recorded, and so this is just sort of a practical thing. How do we get a copy of the recorded presentation?
We will send this out to those on the call. We'll send a link out here, if not today, first of next week.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Mike is one of my partners in our little brewery here in Spokane, Washington. We're having a fun time trying to create a fun brewery that, helps bring the community together.
Sure, that's great.
This is Sean. Can I ask one more question, please?
Absolutely.
So I've been interested. I've got an economics background, and the notion that Chesterton and Belloc talked about distributism, I always struggled with how that would be applied in kind of our modern economy. And I look at ESOP as kind of either a bridge or maybe a fulfillment of that. Any thoughts on how this relates to the notion of kind of small is beautiful, and the notion that you'd want to certainly get away from these large corporate structures? But I never understood, how do you go from the existing environment without some Orwellian government that artificially is limiting the size? So does this fit into that philosophy at all?
Absolutely, Sean. I'm quite familiar with McNabb and Belloc and Chesterton. I think that they're incredible, and they're oftentimes quickly dismissed. All they talk about is each person having 1 acre of land and farming it themselves and milking their own cows and all this kind of stuff. And certainly there is something beautiful to all of us having some engagement with the land. I think that is powerful. But certainly it's a lot more than that. And yeah, I've given talks and written stuff exactly along the lines of what you're suggesting. I do believe that the ESOP, fits very much in line with distributism. And distributism was an attempt to take those principles of Catholic social teaching and try to create some real world, examples of, how to run civil society, based upon something other than the state becoming God itself in communism, and in capitalism, where the corporation becomes God. And, the solution for society is freedom, is well-educated people that, have the ability to provide for their families and themselves. And that's the goal of distributism, and that's the goal of Catholic social teaching. And that's what an ESOP is structured really to accommodate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to weigh in or have questions or comments? Well, Ed, go ahead, Kathy, is what the name is.
Yeah, I got cut off earlier too, and I'm sorry about there is
Go
no
ahead.
screen picture because my computer doesn't do that. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I just really, because I kind of have several questions here. We have a small business manufacturing firm that this particular business has been here since 1973. And, of course, we want to see the success of the business continue even after we retire. And we're all getting close to retirement. So there's been a very low turnover here at this company, too, which now is a concern because now you need to get some new blood in and have the business continue. And certainly we do cross-train. But anyway, I did have some questions that I would like to go over with Gellert. I don't know if it's possible to get his contact information. Yes.
Yeah. My email is my last name, Dornay, Dornay, at pm.me. paulmary.me.
Okay, sorry. Say that again. It's Dornay, Dornay at
PM.
Mm-hmm.
P as in Paul, M as in Mary, dot, M as in Mary, E as in Edward.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to chat with you.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, because I think, the presentation was excellent, and we have heard, actually entertained the idea of doing such a thing and had, worked with somebody that was doing it, but, it's really kind of at a dead end at this point, but I would certainly like to, discuss some things with you.
That's good. Yeah, I've talked with many people that, are looking to sell their businesses, and they're exploring options. And they hear about ESOPs and then they quickly dismiss it because they can't wrap their noodle around it. What does
Yes.
it mean to them?
Right.
And it really, it takes a bit to really understand how is this going to
Yeah.
impact your particular business, valuations, governance, ongoing profitability, all these things. And you really, need to invest a sizable amount of time to evaluate it. And you might come to the conclusion that it's not the right direction for
Right.
whatever reason, but I really encourage people to take the time, spend the money, to really see, what it would mean for your organization and for your people. You care about your employees. You
Oh, yeah.
want them to continue to have jobs.
Yeah.
You care about their family. I'm sure you guys already do a great job of paying attention to your employees and paying them fair wages and helping them with retirement and, extended family leave,
Yeah, it's a family-run business, and we have excellent benefits, and I think that's part of the low turnover that we have here because we offer such good benefits, and we're like a family. We're all family,
Right.
But I think it's very important, and we certainly like to continue to fester that and make the success continue.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, but you kind of reminding me of with the ESOPs. It kind of reminds me of the HSAs. Because when I first introduced those, everybody was all in a panic. Oh, no, I got to pay the bill, even though the company paid 100%. 100%.
Wow. That's generous.
Yeah. So that's when when we were able to. Now we do, we have like a contribution that we do, 2,200 family, 1,100 single, that we
That's
contribute
great.
to the employee. But it used to be 100% when we could do that. And then when the 2008, 2009 crunch hit, we're
Right.
like, we need to survive. So
Yeah.
we had to back off that a little bit. But, at first, I had tried for years to get people to accept that, and nobody wanted it. But then once we introduced it, nobody wanted to let it go. So, and even that's a little hard because they don't want to spend the money
Yeah.
because it's their money. So it's like you have to pay the medical bill. You just got paid for that. Just pay the bill, and they have a time with that, but they've accepted it. They like it, and it's hard to get them to move. But it took a long time for people to understand that and accept that. Even our president here, who's my brother, so it's like,
Yeah. You're
there's
touching
no
on
opportunity.
another aspect with ESOPs is that there needs to be a real considered effort to, educating the employees what ownership means to them.
Yes.
And, bringing them into the conversation. You don't necessarily have to disclose every single, financial matter to every single employee,
Right.
but, you find ways to engage them, to listen to them, for their input, to be considered.
Yes, and that's my thinking as well. To introduce it, at least plant the seed, and then continue from there. But sooner the better.
Yeah, I sent some questions, around. We're going to do some, changing of mission statements and things. And I reach out to everyone in the company, when I was CEO running the business, and I asked them for their opinions, on this stuff. And I reached out and called some people and said, hey, what do you think of our mission statement or whatever? And they said, I don't really have any specific ideas. I think these are great, but I really appreciate you asking me for my input. It's like,
Yep.
it's really not that much of an effort. And oftentimes you do get really good feedback, but, just taking the time to acknowledge that these are real human beings,
Exactly. And I think that's the family part of us in this business. And it's something that my dad had started. And, we try to continue to follow that example. He cared about his people. When he came, he eventually moved to Florida, but he still ran everything and was very involved in the business day to day.
Right.
And yeah, he cared about his people. When he came here, he made sure he went out and talked to people.
Right. Sounds like a
Always
great
asked
dude.
about 'em.
But
Yeah.
if all the
I met
businesses
them.
were run like your business, Kathy, we wouldn't need ESOPs, right? But
Right, I hear you.
unfortunately,
Tough now.
there's a lack of
Yeah, the
virtue in
hiring.
our society.
It is, and that's what's the problem that we're having now with the hiring process and finding that interest and dedication of somebody who wants to work, who knows they have an opportunity and takes advantage of it. We're really having a time finding people
Yeah.
that want to do that. And I met Ed Schaefer, so I know Ed Schaefer. So, don't blame Ed for my killing the show or anything. But just real quick, Ed, Ed's wonderful, and your presentation was wonderful. But you know, I think it is important, like I said, to continue, and you know, we do try to include the employees. It's a very, very important factor for us here. But I think Ed's going to raise that next level for us with his collegium.
Mhm.
Those will be our new candidates for hire.
Well,
That's right.
I feel like we've just made the first step. We've made a connection here that looks like it's really valuable, and that's one of the things that's
No
one of
doubt.
we're here to do. You know, so
Right.
this is just
Kathy,
We're grateful.
Kathy and
Thank you.
Gellert and others, there's a good book a local dentist introduced me to. It's called Everybody Matters.
Mhm.
It's by Bob Chapman, Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family. So again, it's called Everybody Matters, Bob Chapman. It's a really good book. It's not a hard read, but he talks about how he took over this business and how everyone in your company, you need to worry about if they have issues at home. Can they pay their bills? They have problems with their adult parents. And he says if you can keep them happy with their personal life, they're going to do great in your business. And if they're not happy, how can you get them happy? Maybe that's not the right business for them, or maybe they're in the wrong place in your business. So again, Everybody Matters. It's a great read. And this local dentist, you know, he took this approach. He said, you know, when my dad ran the business, he said, it's not just about the money. And he said, Dad, it is about the money. He started getting into it and just started talking with his people. And he's converted to taking care of his people. And he said, you know, our patients, the issue is not their teeth, because he does teeth replacement and implants. He says it's not about the teeth, it's about their heart and their brain. If we can address why they want to fix their teeth, you know, we can help them. And he talked about one guy who was a plant manager of a big company. He had terrible teeth. He wouldn't smile. They fixed his teeth. He became a public speaker for the business because he had more confidence. So again, to your point, Kathy, if you can take care of your folks like family, you know, they'll be more productive and more loyalty. So, you know, interesting. And it goes to this whole ESOP. So what I'd like to do, we're coming up on the clock here. I want to thank Ed for bringing Gellert to us. Gellert, I want to thank you for being part of our lives. We appreciate it. I've learned quite a few things. I've taken some good notes. We'll send out this recording to everyone else. And, you know, if you want to contact me, Paul at Hagerstown.org. If you can't connect up with Gellert or Ed, I'll help you do that. And Ed, any closing comments? And then Gellert, we'll let you have the last word. Ed, you first, and then we'll finish up with Gellert.
No, Gellert, this was just superb. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. I couldn't have asked for a better kind of first sponsored event for the Collegium, and it looks like we've made some good contacts, which was really valuable. And we've started to provide, through you, we've begun to provide some real value to the local community. I just couldn't have asked for this to have gone better. So thank you for taking the time to do it.
Yeah, thank you guys for your work, you know, in helping out the town of Hagerstown, and you know, Ed, for taking our kids and trying to do the last little bit of forming them into, you know, productive adults, you know, that are focused on maximizing their positive contribution to society. But I would just, you know, thank you guys for listening to me and rambling. But I would encourage you to, you know, look out for employee-owned firms. You know, maybe you know, like Kathy, you could turn your company into an ESOP. But support those businesses that are doing that. Support the businesses that are doing good things in your community. You know, don't support these businesses that, you know, are paying slave wages, that are peddling crappy products, that are, you know, poisoning our children. You know, so find good companies. There's a lot of them. Find them. You know, you pay a few more bucks, and you get a better product. It lasts longer. That's good for you. You know, it's good for your teeth. You know, it's good for society. So hopefully encourage you a little bit to do that. But thanks for your time. If anybody has any questions, or if I can help anybody in any way, I love people. I love seeing people excited about their jobs. It's so rewarding to, you know, bring some people into a company, to help them learn new skill sets, help them get fired up about their job, and to make a good amount of money for their family. I have employees, that make more than $1 million a year that when they joined me, they were making less than 50 grand, and to see that kind of growth, doing good things in the community is really rewarding. But, maybe you guys won't create an ESOP, but, you can support one. You can do, little things to help promote, broader ownership. So thanks a lot, y'all.
Thanks. Have
Have a wonderful day.
And yeah, be safe. Stay
you.
healthy.
Good luck, Ed and Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.